To be honest, like I actually don't like most horror comedies. Like I have my favorites like American Werewolf in London and Cabin in the Woods and Shaun of the Dead and Sam Raimi movies. Like, and those are all very different from each other. But other than those, for the most part, I feel like you're neither laughing or scared, you know? It's tricky. So I was trying to find a way to make sure the scary never feels silly, so it doesn't feel like a spoof. And then also being brutal on the jokes. Like there could be a joke that would make us laugh so hard in the writer's room, but if it felt like it was going to take away from the story, we just have to cut it. And so it was a lot of being really strict on stuff like that.
Widow's Bay creator Katie Dippold spent her career putting funny people inside situations that were a little bit too big for them. While a co-producer and writer for Parks and Rec, Dippold once described the trick for great writing as starting from a normal place, finding the first unusual thing, and then playing it real enough that the funny thing could grow. That's the seed she planted while creating Widow's Bay. She took something impossible and convinced everyone to treat it like it belonged in the room, and then let reality start bending around a bit. It's her first time running her own show, the first time a network handed her the whole thing instead of a piece of someone else's, and you can feel that difference almost immediately. It plays like a writer finally following one strange idea all the way through. And this idea, as far as I can tell, is this. Fear and comedy are closer than we usually admit. Both happen when the world stops behaving the way it's supposed to. A joke is a small collapse of expectation, while a scare is a larger one. Most shows that mix the two treat them like separate ingredients, measured out carefully so one doesn't ruin the other. Tom Loftus is the mayor of a cursed New England island. The curse has been there for generations, and his answer to it is to increase the illusion of grandeur on the island. He's hilariously obsessed with becoming the next Martha's Vineyard. It's a strange and unique premise. A curse being sold as a vacation destination is already funny and frightening inside the same sentence. You can feel the whole show hiding in that pitch. But I understood it on a gut level before I understood it as an argument. I was watching the Patricia house scene, and it felt like Widow's Bay tipping its cap directly to Michael Myers and the old slasher genre. It had one person panicking, one impossible thing moving with horrible patience, and somehow the slow one always feels closer. The scene works because it knows the old slasher joke without glorifying it. Patricia is doing what every victim does in this kind of scene. She's running, panicking, and making stupid decisions. But then she gets to the gas station and the vibe immediately shifted before I could diagnose it. So I laughed before the fear left me. Not because the scene stopped being scary, but because the show knew exactly which horror language it was speaking, and it had the nerve to let that ridiculousness sit there beside the fear. That's when I realized Widow's Bay was letting both genres live in the same moment. I went in expecting a horror show with jokes stitched into it, and by the end of the season, I wasn't sure those categories were holding anymore. Somewhere around episode 3, I stopped being able to describe what I was watching, and when I went looking online, it turned out nobody else could describe it cleaner either. You can watch people argue about Widow's Bay without realizing that this is what they're arguing about. One person says the comedy dilutes the scares, that the horror needs to be taken seriously if it's gonna land. The post itself goes nowhere, but the replies pile up underneath anyway. Somebody else says they hate horror in general and are obsessed with the show because they experience it more as a comedy. A different person tells them that they're both overthinking it because the comedy is the whole appeal. Nobody in that argument's lying. They watched the same episodes and walked away with different verdicts. A lesser show would give its viewer instructions. It tells you when to tense up and when to exhale. Widow's Bay often withholds that instruction, and the discomfort of not being guided becomes part of the experience. Tom Loftus carries a lot of the comedy through his face alone. He's freaking hilarious before he says anything, because his whole expression is doing the work of a man trying to stay publicly reasonable in a situation that has already stopped being reasonable. There's always this tiny delay in him, like some part of his brain is still waiting for the world to become normal again, so he can finish the sentence he started before the curse interrupts him. Tom doesn't release pressure the way comic relief usually does. The curse is still real under every smile, so the smile never gets to be only funny. It becomes a little frightening too, watching someone try to manage something that has no interest in being managed, then keeps trying because the alternative would mean admitting there's nothing left to manage. That's why his performance fits the show so perfectly. He's trapped inside the horror, trying to keep his face arranged into something useful. The comedy comes from the effort, and the fear comes from knowing the effort will never be enough. Part of why Tom's character works so well is his choices. He consistently wants to impress the tourists to drive traffic to the island. He's so obsessed with the island's reputation he doesn't look around. And the show frames that absurdity only in the gap between what he's doing and what's happening. Patricia approaches the same impossible world from the other direction. She meets this horror with organization and structure. After the iconically hilarious chase scene, she has a shotgun leveled at the deceased boogeyman and talks about finishing the job until he is cremated, delivered with the energy of someone closing out an agenda item. It's one of those scenes that seems to lodge itself in the memory of everyone who's seen it. What's funny is Patricia is completely serious. She applies pedantic procedure to something that predates the town itself, and ever so often, against all reason, the procedure almost holds. That almost is where the discomfort lives. A character who is obviously outmatched is easy to laugh from a safe distance. Patricia is different because her competence keeps landing 1 inch short of enough. You start rooting for a checklist to survive with the impossible. You start hoping the paperwork can hold back the thing in the dark, even though some part of you knows it can't. I've known people like Patricia, and I suspect you have too. The ones who answer a real crisis with a spreadsheet because a spreadsheet is the only tool they've ever had. The ones who get called uptight or robotic or missing the point for trying to impose order while everyone else is panicking. Watching her, I kept thinking she's not missing the point at all. She's just the only one in the room still doing something about it, even when the something is as funny as it is. People like me are rewatching individual episodes almost immediately, and the threads about it read less like normal fan enthusiasm and more like people describing a physical after effect. So it begs a question why this show garners so much fan devotion. A show doesn't generate that rhythm by accident. It happens when a single pass can't hold everything that's happening inside a scene, and something in you knows there's more than you manage to catch. The simplest way I can put it is this: the first watch belongs to fear, and the second watch belongs to everything the fear made you miss. There's probably a scientific way to describe that, but the feeling is simpler. The first time through, your body is busy protecting you, and the second time through, it finally lets you notice what's happening in the margins. Jokes that seemed invisible are suddenly sitting there in plain sight. Somebody compared the effect to Shirley Jackson's The Bird's Nest, a story that can read like horror the first time through, and something like comedy the second time. Once you already know where the floor is, it's a sharp comparison. Jackson wrote one book that changes shape depending on what you bring into it. Widow's Bay is doing a similar thing. The first viewing gives you a threat, and the second gives you the strange pleasure of realizing how much was hiding inside of it. Here's what I really think. Fear and comedy are not really opposites. They're both responses to the world refusing to behave. A joke is a small collapse of expectation. A scare is a larger one. One makes you laugh because reality slipped. The other makes you freeze because reality slipped too far. Tom's tourism campaign is not just an absurd bit about small town branding. It's a man trying to dress irrationality up as leadership because leadership is the only language he has. Patricia's paperwork is not just comic relief. It's a woman applying order to something that doesn't recognize order because order is the only tool she trusts. The rest of the town are coping. Every person on that island has made some quiet agreement with the absurd. They'll call it normal as long as it agrees to not notice them pretending. You can see that agreement everywhere once you start looking for it. Nobody fully breaks down, even when the evidence in front of them makes no sense. They find procedure that lets impossible sit quietly inside the ordinary. Because admitting the ordinary was never real is a much harder thing to do out loud in front of your neighbors. A lesser version of the show would let you laugh at that from a comfortable distance. It would make the town a punchline about denial. Widow's Bay keeps closing the distance until denial starts looking a little too familiar. The comedy and horror are not taking turns. They're arriving at the same time, read two ways by two different parts of you, without either one asking permission first. Watch it once for the fear, and watch it again for what the fear made you miss. I still don't know, honestly, which version is a real cut of the show and which is the encore. Maybe that's why Widow's Bay has stayed with me. The funniest moment of your life and the most terrifying moment of your life can be the same moment. Most stories don't want to sit there very long because it's an uncomfortable thing to admit. Widow's Bay doesn't look away from it. It remembers something we mostly forget on purpose. Sometimes the laugh and the scream come from the same place.